every.
That's not what I mean. You know what I mean?
Choose a mixed media indie max film based on the novel The Lively Life of Camilla Delibris, the Librarian by Nivesa Rovido Hatsley. Inspired by the author's passion for early American history and an article in the New York Times, January 2004, on the French and Indian War, 1754-1763, also by World War II, 1941-1945. Everyone here on the walkway over the Hudson would stop moving and come and sit here with me while I read from this novel called The Lively Life of Camilla Delibris, the Librarian. It's about remembering important events in American history, the French and Indian War and World War II. It takes place in 2004. It's a so touching and also so romantic story because young, late 20s Camilla falls in love with William Van Velde, a soldier from the French and Indian War in Upper New York State, in a portrait on the wall of the magnificent Van Velde Victorian mansion. More romance in the novel, with sexiness this time, when Camilla at the library meets a hunk of a Latin lover from Rome, Italy, with an ancient Roman heritage name of Massimo Flaviani. He invites her to visit him in Rome. Hard to exist his sexy callings, like the call of the wild. But Camilla is engaged to Chris Capriello of the famous Italian restaurant Capriello in Brooklyn. Camilla can't decide who to choose. Stay at the library, even though she hears that the library is about to close due to lack of interest in books, due to high technology. Camilla gives the library the usual 100 days. At the end, she hopes she'll be able to choose from the three guys in her lively life. All right, Chris Capriello, Brooklyn, William Van Velde at the New Pastures Public Library, or Massimo Flaviani in Rome. All right, well then, since no walker or jogger or bicyclist is stopping to hear on the walkway here to hear me read, I'll read to you, future viewers of this quite unique film. you acting as counselors to help Camilla choose. To me today, I, Camilla Delibris, will be writing everything that's going on in my life. I need to do this because my life will be drastically different from my old one. In a way, it scares me. What I did today felt like walking out of a cozy, nice peopled, familiar place that protected me and into uncharted territory. Alone. I wanted to get out, of course. Nobody pushed me to face these new challenging problems that must be solved by me and only me. All this on top of my old, lingering, unsolved big one. By putting it in words, I'll be better able to see the whole picture of my existence more clearly. I've always loved written words wherever they go. Now my own will help me do the right thing. Choose the best choice for myself. I hope so. So, Camilla Delibris, you state here in your letter of application for a position of reference librarian that you always wanted to be a librarian and work in a public library. This was said to me by the director of the New Pastures Public Library, Catherine Van Veld, in a low, shaky voice. A woman in her late 60s, she seems to me, prim-looking, dressed properly, white starched cotton shirt. I could barely see her face, since she was wearing a felt hat with a wide brim that hid most of it. It was late February of 2004. She kept looking down at my letter, holding the edges tightly. It seems that one ring on her right hand, large blue stone, no wedding band. Oh, yes, yes, I answered quickly in a firm voice. And it was certainly true. Ever since my days as a library page in my high school days in Bronxville. We were in her small office, a large window reaching almost to the ceiling. On the wood panel walls, the portraits of the Van Veld family, 2 men at least, all from past centuries. It was the Van Veld family of rich merchants that had donated the money in the early part of the 20th century to build the New Pastures Public Library in white marble in the style of a classic temple. Exactly in the year MCM, the Latin letters were carved on the facade. Oh yes, I always wanted to be a librarian in a public library, I said again, adding, even before I was a page in the Bronxville Public Library. I was stuttering a bit. I always felt at home in the library, a quiet place with books to read. I thought I had to explain more about myself because she kept looking at my letter and not saying anything. She was making me nervous, as were her unsmiling family members on the walls looking down at me, probably judging me from old values. It seems as if they knew I had been living with a man that was not my husband for the past 4 years in Brooklyn while attending Pratt Institute. There was no reason for me to be nervous. I too was dressed just properly, a dark suit, chosen for the purpose for the interview. And I had a satchel being a vegetarian. Besides, I knew I already had the job, having been interviewed the day before by the assistant director, Susan Westerly, who had been so impressed with my being a student at Pratt Institute, where I had earned my degree in library science, graduating May of the past year. Impressed even more with the 3 required reference letters. This library sure needs someone like you, she has said. Yet Catherine Varvel, with a pillar of the community name, and old money who had built the library, had the last say. So, nervousness increasing, I clasped my hands and knees together tighter as I sat rigidly across the large, heavy, dark wood desk, and a wooden plaque with her name on it, all in Gothic type. Suddenly, I had a bright idea. I would quote somebody important, a poet, who had said something so truthful in a poem. There is no frigate like a book to take you. True, true, she half whispered, not letting me finish Emily Dickinson. And she was now reading the reference letters. She was taking so long, never raising her head to look at me. True enough, she repeated. I felt I was about to get a panic attack, so I began to take long, deep breaths. I needed this job to set me free, to give me a feeling of personal freedom, accomplishment on my own. For all of my 29 years, I had always been under the protection of my doting parents of retirement age, but both still working, Mama as a per diem daycare teacher, Dee as a journalist working from home. Maybe because my older brother, a freelance journalist, was always roaming the world's war zones looking for stories, they wanted me to live with them in their cozy home in New Pastures. And lately, under the protection of my boyfriend Chris and his large extended family in Brooklyn, owners of the famous Italian restaurant Capriello. Everyone had been nice to me, even hiring me as a waitress and cappuccino maker. I felt crowded upon by them, though appreciating both New Pastures and Brooklyn, crowded upon even by Chris, who had given me an engagement ring. But just to try it once in my lifetime, to come back from work to a place that you liked and you pay the rent. I had found one in New Pastures, a studio in the historic district, signed the lease. Oh, I needed this job, a real job finally. Pay not all the good, but many vacation and health coverage. It meant coming home to myself, to yourself, not having to explain in detail what my day had been like, except to my cats, of course. I don't know, maybe I had to prove something to myself, that I could take care of myself, that I wasn't afraid to be by myself, that I Why do you want to work in a public library? If you love books, you could work in a bookstore, Catherine Belleville asked, eyes on another one of my reference letters, but with a firmer voice. Good question. I had never thought about it, and it had never come up in my classes at Pratt. The question jumped around in my head, out almost on its own, because a public library must be in a community, free books for free people, like free air. It must be for a culture, for a civilization. I want to be part of that. To my surprise, I heard a passion in my voice. Why did you choose to work in the New Pastures Public Library? She asked, with no passion. And the third of the reference letters now. Because I love this beautiful building, all in white marble, with a dome on top. Oh, it looks like a Roman temple. A temple, this one, for the worship of books. Remembering the large open metal book with the words "Man and His Books" written on it, placed on a rugged rock in the grassy spot in front of the library, I quickly added, "For man and his books," even though I wish the words had been for man and woman and their books. This was a truthful answer on my part, even though to be near Chris, I had applied to a library in Brooklyn. Then I added, I was destined to be with books because of my last name. Delibris means of books, from the Latin word libri, books. Delibris, are you interested in the French and Indian War? And what do you know about it? She finally raised her head and looked straight at me, with eyes that had a film over them, which gave them a dull, opaque look. The French and Indian War? Oh, I'm very interested in the French and Indian War. I almost shouted, because I felt Catherine Van Veld, for some reason, was very, very interested. I wasn't really all that interested. My social studies teacher had barely mentioned it. It was my brother who was obsessed with it besides the Civil War, and he had brought it to my attention, and its importance in American and world history. I loved The Last of the Mohicans, Hawkeye, Chingangook. Oh, I saw all the movies, the silent one, the one with Randolph Scott, and the last one with Daniel Day-Lewis. I stopped. I was out of breath. It was my brother who had made me watch this silent, violent movie. Rested to her eyes that had suddenly been filled with a bright light, I went on. For this woman that seemed not to be in the best of health needed to hear more on the French and Indian War. I began repeating some of the words my brother had said to me. The American frontier, the wilderness, the battles gave us American colonists a taste for freedom. I could have gone on a lot more. But then I was out of breath. Bless you, Camilla Delibris. I've long waited for a librarian like you. You see, my ancestors fought in this war. I don't want them to be forgotten. We in New York State must remember the very important war that changed the course of history. The 250th anniversary is coming up in 2005, and the New Pastures Public Library is going to have lectures, books, displays, reenactments to commemorate this very important war for America. Are you ready, Camilla, to give a heartfelt participation in the events. I'm relying on your knowledge and creativity. I'm ready, I said. What else could I have said? I felt caught in this whirlwind entitled The French and Indian War. You're hired. Congratulations. Welcome to the staff of the New Pastures Public Library. Her drawn, ashen face seemed less so now as she pushed a button. Almost immediately, the assistant director, Susan Westerly, and Mary Patterson, an older librarian whom I had also met on my first interview and who seemed always, like today, unlike Susan, stern, unfriendly. I felt good now and mentally thanked my brother, now doing a story in Kabul, Afghanistan. Susan, Mary, I told you I'd find a librarian who knew all about the French and Indian War. She said it with a bit of smugness in her voice. She introduced me to Susan and Mary. Susan, and said with a smile, "Welcome to the staff of the New Pastures Public Library." Mary, without a smile, just said, "Welcome." Yes, Vivi, you as director always knew what was best for the New Pastures Public Library. Never lost hope for the library your family founded. I, as the new director, will dedicate myself to keeping the standards and traditions of the Van Veld family. Susan spoke in a solemn tone of voice, looking up at the portraits on the walls as if she had to answer to them. Mary said nothing, but she too looked solemn. I assumed that Vivi meant Van Veld, Catherine Van Veld, who was explaining to me now that Mary was the head of special projects, one of the major ones at hand being at the preparation for all the many activities of the French and Indian War. Since Mary, of course, was doing other projects, one of the major one being the summer reading program for teenagers, perhaps I should be put in charge of the French and Indian War commemorative event. I seem to know so much about it. We should put our heads together, included, hers included. Wow, I was just hired and already put as a project director for a war I had forgotten about. But hey, I was hired. I had a job with books, which gave me benefits, financial independence. I feel good and ready for the challenge. To the American flag, Catherine Van Veld pointed to the plaque, and hand over her heart, she began. Susan, Mary, and I, of course, said a pledge that was on the wall with her, hands over our hearts. I pledge allegiance to the New Pastures Public Library and to man and his books. A grave silence followed. Good, she then said, and taking a deep breath and smiling slightly added, and now, Susan, Mary, take this young librarian, Camilla Deliberate, to lunch and regale her with tales of the lively life at the New Pastures Public Library. This is the statue outside the restaurant at Parmigiano where they had taken me, and there's one also at Capriello's. I call her Pippa. She reminds me of Pippa in Florence. When Pippa passes, God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. to regale the young librarian with tales of the lively life at the New Pastures Public Library, sneered Mary, followed by, my ass. She had already downed almost all of the white wine in the tall glass she had ordered, in contrast to mine and Susan's cup of regular coffee. They had taken me to Parmigiano, an Italian restaurant, which reminded me of Capriello's in Brooklyn, and at this Parmigiano there was Roberto Milanese playing the accordion, just like my Chris at Capriello. I felt good to be with them, and lucky and looking forward to have gotten a job for which I had diligently prepared myself. We ordered arborio rice. While waiting for it to come, I told him about Capriello and Chris Capriello, that I was engaged to him. And then again, I was reminded of when Pippa passes Browning's lovely poem about Pippa in Florence, because Capriello's had one right at the cashier. And then she was so pretty, sweet, puffy-cheeked face, merry eyes. You know, when Pippa passes, God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. But when Mary said those words, I was jolted and turned towards her. I'll regale you all right, Camilla, by telling you that the New Pastures Public Library is going to close real soon. What? I said, startled this time. Don't listen to her, Camilla. It's the wine talking, snapped Susan, swallowing hard her garlic bread. Turning to Mary, she snapped again at her. You should have ordered wine. You know, you shouldn't have ordered wine. You know very well you can't tolerate it, just like your father. Mama always had a problem with you and him. Your sisters? I exclaimed, surprised this time around. Just half. Thank goodness I got the first and better father, and therefore the better genes. Ah, boy, I call them by their real name. The thank you, and yes, genes. As kids in the mansion, thank you, Catherine, for giving me your pretty dresses you don't want anymore. And as grown-ups in the library, yes, as she would make you the director, said Mary. She did, said Susan. And may I remind you, half-sister, that it was Catherine and her Vivi money that paid our college tuition. It didn't come free. Mama earned it with all the cleaning, washing, ironing, and in that monstrous Victorian mansion. And then something else happened. Well, she says this. She says that, listen, the rich branch of the Van Veld family may have built the library, but the poor branch will keep it open. This came from Susan, and it really frightened me. She says that before Mary said that, yes, you're the new director, but she never accepted your suggestion that the library have wheelchair access, elevators, have a cafe like Barnes and Noble and Borders. She said no to all that because she's stuck in the early part of the 20th century and she can't move away from there. She can't accept change. And Susan said again, well, I certainly can. And let me tell you again, as the new director of the New Pastures Public Library, I'm going to bring it into the 21st century. And Mary, listen to this. Instead of just 1 cup of regular coffee, you should take another one. Listen, Mary, the rich branch of the Van Velde family may have built the library, but the poor branch will keep it open. What? You two are Van Velde? I exclaimed, startled again. Both shrugged and muttered, distant and poor relations. So we did have our arboreal rice, and then I got some a salad, and then this happened that we did order tiramisu, and then with a straight face, Mary suggested that if Susan wants new programs, she could have belly dancing with a read on the history of this ancient dance to make it legit. Susan didn't answer. She ignored both of us, seeming lost in thought. And then she said that it was time to go. And so, of course, Susan did pay, and Mary confessed that she knew very little about the French and Indian War, and she was going to be very happy that I was going to take charge of the 250th anniversary that was coming up. Mary had seen the movie, The Last of the Mohicans, with Daniel Day-Lewis. She was not at all into war movies, but had to go see it with Sin, the man she was living with. Sin was a retired IBMer and a fanatic reenactor of all the battles fought in America, beginning with the French and Indian War. And now we were going out, and we're going to be back at the New Pastures Public Library.